Bushfire seasons are hardly new for Australians, but in October, were we ready for the abrupt start to the 2013 fire season? Well, one of our regulars on Breaking Politics, he's on each Tuesday, is the New South Wales Senator for the Nationals, John Wacker-Williams. He's in his Inverell office in northern New South Wales. He joins us now. John Williams, thank you for your time. Tell us, do you think New South Wales did everything it could to be ready for these bushfires?
Tim, you can never do everything possible to prevent savage fires. It's a management program, and one of my pet hates, Tim, is simply locking up country and leaving it. National parks, and I've been on this issue for many years now. I've moved a formal notice of motion in the Senate saying we should allow grazing in national parks. It's about managing the amount of fuel on the ground. Now, that can only be done two ways, either hazard reduction burning or grazing. Now, when the Victorian government went out there and allowed cattle to go into the alpine country to reduce the level of fuel on the ground, Tony Burke, then Minister in Canberra in the Labor Party, pushed by the Greens, kicked those cattle out, said you can't do it. Now, if we don't manage our environment, it will simply burn. The fuel levels will get up to, once you get above 5 to 10 tonnes a hectare of fuel, which is described as grasses and twigs 6 millimetres diameter or less, you get a 40 degree day, a 50 kilometre wind. It's uncontrollable. And those terrible Black Saturday bushfires in Victoria, they had up to 150 tonnes to the hectare of fuel and just devastating fires. We need to manage those areas.
So what should have been done in the Blue Mountains, for example, that wasn't done?
Reducing fuel levels. Now, that's easy to say and difficult to do, Tim, because a lot of the country is very hilly, heavily timbered, very rough country. Hazard reduction burning would be difficult. But what I'm saying is we need to do more hazard reduction burning during the cooler months. And where the country is open, we should allow grazing in those national parks. Go to Coonabarabran and the terrible fire last year in the Warrumbungles. It was just a disaster. And we need to control. Locking up country and leaving it is an equation for savage bushfires. Extreme heat into the crown of the trees, destroying the seedlings on the ground and the seeds for vegetation, plus travelling so fast, killing the animals. I mean, just locking up country in the national parks is a disastrous way of conservation. So obviously more resources, and what we've had is so much country in New South Wales shut up for national parks. Obviously the national parks do not have enough resources to manage it.
And how dangerous is our bushfire situation as a result of this at the moment?
Varies from season to season, Tim. You get a wet year, a wet summer, a wet spring, big growth, dense growth in grasses, and then the heat comes, it dries off. You get a dry storm, lights a fire up and away it goes. As I said, it comes back to management, and no doubt places like Torrally Station, more than 90,000 hectares bought by Penny Wong when she was a minister. If that's not managed, it will burn. And the red gum forest down at Millawar and the Victoria, no more grazing in them. They were state forests. They've been managed for over 100 years by the timber cutters. Now it's locked up to national park, and red gum will not stand fire. It will destroy it.
We expect to know more detail today on the government's National Commission of Audit. To be successful, a National Commission of Audit almost has to recommend significant cuts, doesn't it?
No doubt, Tim, but hence that's why we're having the audit. We need to know exactly where the money is, where it isn't, and how the Australian taxpayers' value for dollar is being spent, and hence the audit. And $287 billion as of last Friday, the federal government debt, and growing. The ceiling is $300 billion. Obviously, we in government now, one of the first issues as far as legislation will have to be to raise that credit limit until we can get that budget back into the black or near the black. This is one of the problems we've inherited, and it's one of the probably most serious issues facing us as a new government.
In terms of selecting commissioners to run the audit, who do you think would be good, and what qualifications do they need to do the job well?
Tim, I wouldn't have a clue. Being someone out in the bush here, who would be the best person, I would not know, but obviously someone who knows a lot about the private sector, experienced in financial management, in business management, and who can, because the government must be run just like a business. You have a certain income, If you spend more than you earn, you either borrow it. If you get into too much debt, your business, you can't finance your debt, you get sold up. Government is no different, except we don't get sold up. We just face cap levels, ceiling levels of debt, and that's what's got to be controlled. So this is a very important issue to see exactly what the issues are in the budget, in the debt, and how the taxpayers' dollars are being spent.
How important is it for each state and territory to be governed by the same laws on marriage, for the national law on marriage to be completely consistent?
With the ACT, with the legislation going in today about this very issue of same-sex marriage, Tim, this will be a controversial one. Senator George Brandis, Attorney General, has already flagged that if the legislation is passed, which it probably will be, then there will be a High Court challenge. In 1961, we got the federal laws of the Marriage Act. Before then, it was the state laws controlled the actual legislation of marriage. And under Section 109 of the Constitution, where if there is a discrepancy between state and federal over issues, the latter rules the roost. So this will be challenged, no doubt. And Senator Brandis has said, look, if you pass the legislation, don't bring it into effect straight away. Let's hopefully get a quick decision from the High Court on this constitutional issue. Otherwise, people go to the ACT, same-sex couples wishing to get married and then find their marriage is invalid. That would be not good for them.
What's your position on this issue more generally? Do you hope ultimately that these laws are passed, or do you hope for the status quo with the laws as they are?
Tim, I've made it very clear over many years publicly that I do not support same-sex marriage. I support equal rights for same-sex couples, whether it be in disputes or breakups, superannuation, even splitting of assets. People like politicians are in a same-sex relationship that their partner has the same entitlements as my wife. I support that all the way along, but I do not support same-sex marriage because I believe marriage between a man and a woman is probably the oldest thing on our planet, whether it be Jewish, Christian, Islamic. I see it as a Christian bond between a man and a woman, and that's my view, and I respect other people having a different view, but I'll stick to my view.
How much of the change from the carbon tax to the government's direct action plan will require legislation to give it effect, and how much might actually just be done by government regulation? That's
the very issue that Greg Hunt, the Minister, is now looking at with a $1.5 billion fund, whether it can be brought in through regulation. So we're still yet to work this out and find out the details. But Tim, as far as abolishing the carbon tax, look, if I had $1 for every time Prime Minister Tony Abbott told the Australian people that the election on September the 7th would be a referendum on the carbon tax, I'd be pretty wealthy. It was made clear. And now we've got the arguments in the Labor Party, whether it be Mark Bishop saying we should let it go through, or whether it be Bill Shorten saying, no, we've got to keep the price on carbon, various opinions. Look, who knows what requires regulation, what requires legislation. Greg Hunt is working through those very issues.
Barnaby Joyce, your colleague, says there needs to be a substantially different tax liability for people living in Northern Australia. Yes. People in the Northern Territory and nearby pay less tax, he says. Now, the Coalition has promised a white paper on this. What's the point of having a white paper if you guys are already out there saying this is what the answer ought to be?
To learn more, Tim, I think one thing we can learn from the previous government is do not rush things, get it right. And that's what the O'Farrell government has done in New South Wales, is not just rushed legislation through. Let's get it right. Now, Barnaby Joyce has made it quite clear before the election that he was keen to see 5 council regions have zonal taxation. We want incentive to grow Australia out of the cities. We've got people stacked on top of each other in the cities, Tim. While we've got this great big area of land in Australia, I want to see an incentive for people to move out to those regions, develop business, develop their future, because the problems we have in the cities, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be the cost of a house. I mean, in Sydney, you pay $600,000 for a dog kennel, basically. Plenty of land out here in the country. Let's have an incentive to move them out.
Senator John Williams, it's great to have you on board Breaking Politics. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Tim. Thank you.